Hi, everyone. My name is Lonnie Bloom. I'm an audit partner here at Withum, where we provide audit tax and advisory services. I am a part of our technology practice, and I co-lead our e-commerce sector. Really excited to be here today with Nick DiNatale, who's the founder of ShipPlug. So for today's conversation, we'll be discussing challenges around using third-party carriers for shipping products and some ways e-coms can save money on shipping costs. So Nick, I'm really excited to have you here today. Maybe you could start just by sharing a little bit about your background, including your experience on the carrier side and your time spent at FedEx.
Sure, Lonnie. I guess I'll even start a little bit further back. I'm actually an accountant as well, where I started my working career at KPMG. So worked in their audit practice, and that's really where I learned about saving money, right? How important that is to a business owner at all costs. And then moving over into FedEx is my next job. That's where I was able to take my accounting background and help relate that to customers. Now, quickly, I worked at FedEx for 12 years, had 6 promotions, and what I quickly realized is how convoluted FedEx, UPS, DHL, all the carriers make the invoicing convoluted, the claims process convoluted, the pricing agreement convoluted. And it's just not consistent with one carrier or at one time in history. It's consistent every year and multiple times through the years. So that's why I left FedEx, was to help the customers understand what they were paying or what they could be paying in shipping, knowing how competitive it is, especially in e-commerce.
Great. Yeah, I didn't realize you had an audit background. That's good to hear. So
I know the hard work it takes to be an accountant. So
yeah,
you're a special breed.
Yeah, and you guys are doing interesting things over there. So I'm excited to kind of get into it. Nick, in your experience, what types of third-party carriers are e-coms using to ship products, and does their selection of those carriers change over time as they're growing?
Yeah, I think so. I think most e-commerce brands default to the post office, right? It's easy. They come to my door every day. A lot of e-commerce businesses are started out of the living room or out of the garage. We hear those stories all the time, and typically you default to the post office. Now, as your product changes, maybe you get bigger boxes, bigger orders to retail. Most companies then take a look at FedEx or UPS. Now, as you scale, there's a multitude of smaller carriers that can help mitigate the cost, but that's once customers get to thousands of pieces a day. Would you be considered for one of those third-party carriers? But most people default to the post office, FedEx, and UPS.
Right. Yeah, that's how I think about it. Just as a consumer, post office, UPS, FedEx. I think the first time we spoke, you were kind of listing out all the other smaller third-party carriers, and I just didn't realize that there's all these other carriers out there. Would you say, I guess, in a growth cycle for a company, there's a strategy around choosing those smaller providers versus the sort of the big carriers like UPS, FedEx?
Right. We always get the question from our new startups or our smaller customers, how do the big companies do it? Right? How do they ship that product at that price? Well, a few ways. Once you have volume, you can then negotiate with the carriers directly. You're not paying the rack rate that every company in the world is paying. You can then negotiate with the carriers. Now, as you really scale, the price can come down. Once you really have volume, you can get closer to your customers, so then it makes the final mile delivery cost less. Now that's all as you scale, and that's why it's so important for e-commerce brands or really any company to focus on supply chain. We've heard of horror stories where the supply chain wasn't set up correctly, especially over COVID, and it shut customers' businesses down. So that's why it makes sense now to invest in your cost, but not only your cost, your infrastructure, your customer experience when it comes down to the e-commerce brand, making that final mile as fast, as customer friendly, and as low cost as possible.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. So when entering a contract with a larger shipper like FedEx or UPS, is there, you talked about negotiating rates. Is there, how much flexibility is there to negotiate better rates? And, what can companies do to get the most effective cost savings when they're signing a contract with a shipper?
Well, I think, yes, there's always the ability to get better rates. I mean, in our experience, we've seen the carriers be willing to lose for certain customers, right? Because they make up so much volume. Now, with that being said, I think every e-commerce customer needs to understand their costs. What we see is that people can't understand the data first, right? Brands, they don't understand what they're paying piece by piece. They look at an average, but maybe they sell something that's huge painting, and they didn't take in consideration all of the other surcharges that could be involved. So I think the first thing that brands need to do is to understand their data, understand shipment by shipment, order by order. What does that really cost? Most people offer free shipping up to a certain value amount, right? So if you spend $100, you get free shipping. Well, we've seen countless customers actually lose on that model, where the customer is spending more, so they have to put it in a bigger box. And then the bigger box actually makes them not profitable because they don't have 50, 60% margins like we'd all like to have.
Right.
So that would be the first thing, is understand your costs order by order.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that, talk about the bigger box. There's, a lot of our clients have many different SKUs that they sell, right? So it could be small products to larger products, and each SKU, each item might have a different sort of strategy around how am I shipping that product to the end customer. So yeah, the data is very important, and this understanding it is key.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I'm glad you mentioned that.
With an invoice, we've had customers where they've had their invoice mistakenly turned to paper, and the mailman would roll their UPS, their FedEx invoice on a dolly. That's how many line items a weekly invoice could be for a customer shipping 30,000 pieces a day, 1,000 pieces a day, right? That's over a 2-week time frame. You're having thousands of line items. So how could you understand your data?
Right. There's so many logistical challenges I think of when shipping products to customers, including damaged products or late shipments. Who's on the hook for these added costs, and what can ShipPlug do to help businesses recover some of those costs and some of those losses?
Well, so a few things. The late shipments. Now, that's up to the shipper to file for those late shipments. Now, what we have is software where our customers can connect to our software, and it will automatically file the refunds on behalf of our customer, and then it automates the refund. So we make sure that we're going to hold the carriers accountable for their promised delivery date. And when it's not, our customers, the shippers, get paid the money back.
Yeah, it's great. And you have an interesting business model, and maybe you could talk about sort of the pricing and how you guys.
Well, that then in that case, the carrier's on the hook. Now, there's always in e-commerce the big question, and I know a lot of listeners are going to ask, what happens when FedEx, UPS, the post office says it's delivered, but my customer didn't get it? My customer called and said, we didn't get it. We call FedEx. FedEx says they didn't get it. At that point, the carrier is the best person to negotiate with, because they could refund you up to $100. Now, in most cases, the shipper needs to just build that in as a cost of goods. There's going to be countless times where the carrier delivered the package. Maybe it's to an apartment complex and they didn't get it. Maybe they delivered it and there was porch piracy. There's countless times where the shipper, the e-commerce brand, is going to be on the hook for that. That's
Right.
very important to understand.
Right.
Now, what's also important is to understand your chargeback ratio, because it might make sense just to refund the customer or ship them another one to keep them happy, right? Because the more chargebacks you have, I mean, your banks could shut you off. So that's something important that there's two different things. The refunds for late shipments, the carrier is the one responsible for that. That's a carrier problem. Now, the claims process where there's a dispute on delivery, now damages is easy, right? When I sold this shirt, I didn't give it to UPS dirty, right? I give them hundreds every day that are new. Well, of course, UPS damaged it. Now, the biggest problem, though, is the porch piracy. Now, if you have a high level of porch piracy, to mitigate that, there are insurances that are out there, third-party insurances that you could buy to help mitigate that particular issue of the shipment being delivered and your customer disputing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of layers involved in shipping products and making sure you're not incurring more losses than you should, right? And it sounds like you guys are helping companies recover some of those losses to,
we can definitely help recoup for late shipments. But then I think the next thing is the visibility and understanding your costs. Our software can break down a very convoluted UPS, a very convoluted post office invoice, and put it in a format where our customers can self-service, look at the data, and truly understand what they're paying, even by order number. So then that customer, the e-commerce brand, can truly understand if they're making a profit or not.
Right.
When some brands will sell at a 2, 3, 5%, 10% margin, a dramatic change in shipping costs can actually result in a loss.
Right. Yeah, and you never want to see that. So your platform for customers, is it, I guess, user friendly? How do they see the data, and how do they manipulate that? And sounds like there's a lot of automation involved too when it comes to recovering some of those losses.
So we work off of the major carrier invoices. We upload it every week just as you get invoiced. So then the customer can see that. Now, as things change in the market, we do have a white glove service where we assign you a seasoned carrier veteran who's negotiated thousands of contracts with multitude of carriers. But then the software can help recognize these changes in the market with demand surcharges, with residential surcharges. We can help customers understand the year-over-year increase. Right. So I think the software helps keep our very seasoned former carrier employees that understand the contract negotiation. It leverages the software to help our customers achieve the lowest cost with the carrier. That's right. Our ultimate goal. We can help with claims for lost packages. We can help with the refunds for late shipment, but we truly want to make the best decision on the carriers to ship with. Not only sometimes cost, but services as well. That brand experience is very important.
Right.
There's reasons brands scale that are more expensive than the lowest cost. Now, it definitely depends on your product, but at ShipPlug, we can give you the option to do both, see service and see the low cost options that are out there.
Right. Yeah, with the supply chain too, it's just ever changing. It's not constant. There's changes, disruptions in the supply chain all the time. So you're going to see, rates changing, market changing, depending on where you're manufacturing, shipping your product overseas. There could be, issues just getting product. We saw a lot of that through COVID. So it sounds like
issues people had, it changed business, and that's when I think people really put a focus on supply chain.
Right.
Right. And how important is that?
Yeah, and your product, it's just good timing with all the supply chain disruptions and you guys coming in. It doesn't sound like you're one and done, right? You're not going to go in and negotiate contracts and then that's the end of your service offering. This is a constant process.
Yeah, we look at it as a partnership, because one of the biggest values we bring is our experience in seeing what other e-commerce shippers have done.
Right.
We can make recommendations on box sizes, on packaging, on warehousing, on duty and taxes, on best places to even source from. So we can really help be that partner.
Yeah.
That lowers your costs and then also makes recommendations to help you scale.
Right. Yeah, and that's a huge value add. Nick, let's talk about other ways that e-coms can cut costs. We've seen a huge shift in sort of mindset with our e-commerce and tech clients where investors are more concerned about margins and profitability rather than revenue and growth at all costs. How else do you consult businesses, who want to create more meaningful cost savings? You talked about a few things. I think in our previous conversation, you mentioned Section 321 Type 86 clearance, which is a program.
So I think when a lot of times it is a race to the bottom, you need to take in any situation. What you mentioned is a tax where the de minimis value in the United States is $800. What that means is anything below $800 that's shipped to a different importer of record moves into the United States duty and tax free. So as you're an e-commerce company, you really need to understand what all of your costs are. Some people bring an ocean container and think that's the cheapest way because ocean's cheap. Well, can we warehouse that maybe on the border in Mexico or Canada and ship our e-commerce orders one by one? And now we're saving 25% on duty and tariffs. Can we then leverage a 3PL in Mexico that has a lower pick and pack rate than our warehouse in the United States? Can we lower the cost there? Now, how does that also impact our transit time? So we need to outweigh that, right? So that's an example of where we can help brands, we can help e-commerce companies really, really take advantage of our background. And then that can help change companies. I mean, we've saved companies $10, $20, $50 an order.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's the experience you bring is just a value add, right? That's a pretty significant value add to customer companies that are just spending so much on shipping. So if you were, just as an example, if you're an e-commerce business getting product manufactured overseas, let's say China, and you're getting it delivered to the States here and selling in the U.S., and all of your products under that $800 threshold, I guess how would you advise that type of company to, structure their distribution channels?
Well, I think it makes sense to get it close to the United States. So then as you get your e-commerce orders one by one, you can still ship ocean to Canada. You can still ship ocean to Mexico. You clear it in those countries. And then you can work with partners that have licensing to do an informal clearance where that is shipped one by one. Right.
And then you're saving on the duty and tax, right? Because then it's exempt under that clearance.
Yep.
Right. That's great. Yeah, so we talked a lot about what e-coms can do to save costs on shipping. Is there, I guess, anything top of mind for you when talking to e-coms that you'd like to emphasize, or anything else that first conversations with a client, or are you, what are some of the issues that you're bringing up?
Well, I think first, every customer is different, right? So everybody has different pain points, and that's what we truly understand. But at the end of the day, everybody cost is typically a pain point. But I think when we take the approach is that we want to understand what is the goal long term, right? We work with countless customers that need next day shipping, right? So is the low cost always the best option? Well, if we're shipping blood, no. So we really want to understand what are your supply chain goals. So some is not just to lower cost. So with that being said, that's exactly why we take the approach of we always ask questions first to our customer. Then we formulate a plan to optimize the supply chain and achieve the lowest cost.
Right. Yeah, that's important. It's not one size fits all, right? And it's the same with our clients. Every client is different, has different motivations, needs an audit for a different reason, right? So coming up with a strategic plan for your clients is, it's pretty important to make sure they're getting the right value add.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really appreciate the time. I guess, Nick, any other highlights you wanted to note, or any success stories, any clients that you've saved a ton of money and are reoccurring clients?
Yeah. So we have an e-commerce brand, and the person that was our relationship was actually in procurement. Now, in procurement, as many people know, it's almost a thankless job, right? You negotiate a lot of contracts. You're ultimately trying to lower the costs, and that's really ultimately it. Now, what happened when we helped assist in a contract negotiation, we actually cut this customer's cost by 80%, which then allowed them to repurpose that money into sales. So for one of the first time in history, procurement helped sales. Now that person won the employee of the month, right? But that changed the owner's life, the company's life. If you can cut your biggest cost by 80%, it makes sense to have a conversation with a company that can really help do that. And that's our biggest success story is having the employee win employee of the month because of a partnership they made with us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great highlight. Just the importance of evaluating some of your largest costs and figuring out a strategy to lower those costs, to increase margins, increase profitability. Sounds like you guys are doing a great job of working with clients and building that partnership, building that relationship. So it's great to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Nick, really appreciate the time today. I think it was very insightful. If anyone's listening wants to, connect separately on anything e-commerce related or want to learn more about ShipPlug, feel free to reach out to myself or Nick directly, and we're happy to chat more. So appreciate the time.
Thanks, Lonnie. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick.